Okay, let's go ahead and do this. All right. First of all, to thank you for everyone for attending, especially for those of you that are currently in Europe. I know it's late in the day for you. The It is much appreciated for you sticking around for this particular conversation. What we will try to do next month is we're going to try to split this up into two. So that we'll have this conversation twice on the same day. Once more early morning and more early morning U.S. East Coast time for those located in U.S. or the East Coast U.S. and over in Europe. And since by that time we should have team members that are located in Asia Pacific, we'll also need to repeat this at a time that is where they can attend. So that'll be late afternoon. So we'll try to repeat, so that'll be about 10, 12 hours later. So we'll do this twice in future iterations. Exact timing to be considered or to be determined. That's the appropriate way of phrasing it. Okay. Just like last time, we did this asynchronously through an issue. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look through it at least and see what we did and the items that were determined to have slipped. And I know we had some commentary as far as what went well, what didn't go well, and where we can improve. Before diving in deeper on that, I want to add in one more thought, and this is my fault for not being ready, because I meant to do this before. Is anyone here familiar with what is referred to as the retrospective prime directive? No. Okay. I will add this to. I will make sure to broadcast this in another time in another forum. But the retrospective prime directive states that regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. At the end of a project, everyone knows much more. Naturally, we will discover decisions and actions we wish we could do over. This is wisdom to be celebrated, not judgment used to embarrass. That is the retrospective prime directive. So with that being said, let's dive into the retrospective itself. Let's go through who is here. As far as what went well, we have 3 items that are here, none of which were by people that are on this call. What went well? No hard feature freeze on the 7th. Forming a working group to take proactive steps toward extendable architecture for customer security scans, and can contribute to GitLab UI much faster by learning how to set it up locally for development and how to write storybook docs with live examples. Is there anything anyone else would like to add as far as what went well? So that covers it. How is everyone finding the move to CD and no hard 7th feature freeze on the 7th to be? Is it confusing or is it helpful?
I guess it's helpful, but my merge requests were merged way before the date that would be feature freeze, before the 7th. So I personally, I didn't feel the pressure this time, but I believe that it's convenient and cuts off much pressure from people that opened their MRs like the last week.
Okay. Anything else?
I would just echo Victor's comments. on that.
Okay.
I think there's just going to be some adjustment there to be determined, I suppose, how much stress reduction there is from the change in the feature freeze window. I mean, there's still going to be one.
Kind of, sort of, maybe in a not really way. It depends on how I would argue that there are some changes that will be coming upstream from us that should help. If the inputs into our work are aimed at a month, then that's going to continue to exaggerate a feature freeze stress time period. If we're keeping more of a Kanban rolling weekly priority list and we just keep working the top of the list, and as we groom items, if we find that they're going to take longer than a week, then we don't worry about what the feature freeze is. It's just we just keep working week by week, and we just keep crawling from from the top of the queue. That's probably where we are headed. Are we there yet? No. Is it where we're going? It looks that way. I'll elaborate more, and you'll see more in Slack. And I see IP added another item as what went well is so the house didn't burn down while he was on vacation. I too celebrate houses not burning down. So I'm going to call out that, well, since I see IP working here as well. All right, let's move on because we got more here. Okay, what didn't go well? Everyone can read what's in the issue itself, but is there anything anyone would like to add or echo or extend?
Yeah, I assume that the thing that did go well, that we had more time, probably will bite us in the next release cycle, but that seems to be release cycle, but that seems to be one for the next retro.
I disagree. That I don't think it's going to bite us in the next one. But we'll talk about that in another forum. We'll talk, and I'll elaborate more at the end if we have time. So, what didn't go well? Is there an item that has been mentioned in the issue that anyone here would like to highlight or echo?
I guess just for me, echoing what Paul said, like a lot of the times it was very difficult to get like a merge request ready for maintainer review. I feel really weird about assigning merge requests for maintainer review until the pipeline is like at least passing, you know, whether that means all green or like allowed to fail. I think this last week wasn't as bad, but like the last release was pretty bad because there's random breakages on master. I don't know if it's part of the migration over to a single code base or what was going on, but I'm not really sure what solutions I could offer though.
Okay.
I was just going to say similar things, but I got most of my stuff in before that became a problem, so it didn't affect me too directly, but definitely noticed it being a problem. And also don't have any solutions.
Would you all argue that broken master is becoming a more frequent problem, or is it just becoming more irritating?
I mean, I'm unmuted, so I'll go first, I guess. But you know, in my limited time here, it seems like a recurring problem. I don't know that it wasn't a problem before I got here, but it does seem to be ramping up. I don't know. It's perception, I suppose. I don't have any data on that.
Yeah, I just to add on to that, like I can't say for sure either. I've been here since November, but since November it seemed it kind of there was an uptick in how often it was broken for at least the 2 last releases. But I mean, as of the last 2 weeks, it seems like it's been better. So I don't have enough data points to say if it's a consistent problem. Maybe we just had it happen for whatever reason more recently.
Okay. Does anyone on this call know if there is a practice within GitLab of doing retrospectives when master breaks.
I know that there are production incidents. I recently, like on Friday, came across the issue in the production project that discussed issues related to 500 errors during the staging rollover, and I believe that I've seen some discussions related to other problems, maybe related to broken master as well. I will try to find out. I don't remember precisely.
And I think if you're asking, is there a retro for every single broken master? I would say the answer to that is no.
Yeah, I agree.
There've been too many of them.
I think the closest thing to that we used to have like the release retrospective. So like for the given release, they would have a release retro, and then there, if you had issues with what happened that release, you bring it up. I think was the closest like appropriate forum for that, at least my understanding.
Okay, those still exist, at least for the development organization that we all report up to. So part of what we're doing here is an input into that. So I'm going to filter this down to 1 or 2 items that went well, that didn't go so well, and where we can improve. And that is this stage's contribution to that retrospective. Hearing it stated by more than one person that broken master was an extreme irritation is making it a leading candidate for us to contribute to it. But I'm struggling with what we can do with it as a stage to improve it.
Well, I thought, I mean, again, I'm speaking without knowing like all the details, but like I thought part of the way we prevented broken builds going into master was like having the requirement you don't merge stuff into master if your merge request is failing. I mean, maybe it's more complicated like that. Maybe they're changing jobs, and like, you know, at that point, if you're changing a job, then, you know, that's different than saying, hey, your pipeline's red, don't merge it in. I don't know if that's how enforced that is. I mean, I assume the maintainers are not merging things in. If you have a merge request that is failing, it just is not merged in, unless there are exceptions. Because if you ignore that rule, then that's how you introduce broken things into master.
Mm-hmm. My understanding is that there might be ways that people are gaming the process to make it look like it is passing and it is a green merge, when in fact it is not. And I remember there being a conversation about that in the near past. I'll have to go look it up, and I will, when I find it, I'll add it as a comment on this particular issue.
I think, yeah, and I think it's, you know, worthy of, you know, someone diving into when it bubbles up to the other issue, like why are so many of these happening? I think some of it can also be like you get your specific pipeline green, but hundreds of other changes have been merged into master since then. So when everything gets merged in together, that can cause conflicts as well. Which,
Okay. Anything else to discuss? And I'm not trying to railroad conversation. I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, and I had talked to Lucas about this on our 101s, and this is probably, I've been working on him with mediating this, but like just maintainers, I realize, at least for the front end maintainers, everyone's a little different communication style. Some people prefer pings. Some people refer that you reassign the issue back to them. And I'm talking about more of like intermediate conversations. So like you get a bunch of feedback and you have questions, follow-up questions about the feedback that they left. So you could obviously make the changes that you want. So my experience has been some developers would prefer like, don't reassign it back to me till it's ready for an actual code review. If you need further discussion and clarification, just ping me. And for some developers, maintainers, that doesn't work because they don't check their to-dos, so they have hundreds on there. So for me, my workaround was basically memorizing, working with individual maintainers, what they prefer. It's okay, like I got around it, but for newer developers, something to think about with onboarding, that might cause some churn, because I had MRs kind of sitting there and I had to kind of trial and error to see why it was like sitting there, whether they were, initially I thought as if they were overworked or busy, but in some cases it was just that they did not see, I wasn't communicating in their preferred fashion. Not a huge deal, but it was something that did affect my throughput or process. So.
Okay.
It sounds frustrating. And I don't know. I don't know, like, if we can dictate that everybody does it the same way or anything, but at a minimum, maybe we could require maintainers to have like their working with me README thing. I've seen some folks have that on their GitLab profile or whatever, where it says, hey, I prefer, pings, or I prefer, at mentions or whatever. Just a thought.
Yeah.
It still puts a lot of burden on the individuals to figure that out. Like I'm working with this maintainer, I have to figure out what they do, but at least you can get that information that way.
I'm constantly forgetting where to find this information on the handbook, but I remember that there is a documented style of communication regarding issues. And from what I remember, this flow of reassigning the merge request, excuse me, I've mixed issues and merge requests, and maybe we have guidelines about issues, but we don't have guidelines about merge requests, from what I remember. Because in issues, it's prescribed by handbook that if you want someone's feedback, you just ping him. You do not add this person to the list of assignees. And maybe we should update the handbook on merge requests in similar fashion. Because currently it seems to me that assignment ping pong for merge requests is just a tribal knowledge. It's not documented anywhere.
And I mean, sometimes it's hard to keep up with the handbook, so maybe something has been added, but multiple assignees on merge request is a new thing. And I mean, I've seen discussion back and forth on, preferences. So
yeah, but for me, about multiple assignees, I've seen recommendations of not using them yet across GitLab, because everybody is accustomed to the former style of ping pong between two assignees.
Yeah, and I think to Victor's point, yeah, maybe the follow-up would be to create a GitLab issue to have further discussion, because it's really, once we allowed for multiple assignees for a merge request, like what worked for me, I noticed that it was more explicit that the merge request was ready for review when I unassigned myself and assigned the maintainer in ping pong, because it seems like that's what we were most used to here. Even though GitLab lets you do either or, it empowers you to choose which approach you want for your process. But I think the process traditionally here has been, most people are used to having it explicitly assigned. So that's what I do. Because if I end up assigning myself and then the maintainer, they know they're assigned, but they really won't look at it again until they casually, like, passively look at it. At least if I unassign it to myself, they get a ping and they get an email, you've been unassigned. And then when I reassign it, they'll get another ping, an email saying that, like, hey, you've been assigned this issue, and it's more explicit. At least my experience has been that.
Okay. I'm going to move us on to where we can improve, because we're running up on time. So just in the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward here. Anything mentioned within the issue that anyone would like to highlight, or if someone would like to add or vocalize?
I would just add not add, but just thumbs up about Philippe's addition about release management. I guess we need to ramp up this to reestablish the rotation for release managers.
In a way, yeah. Olivier and I were talking about this last week, about how we can improve this. When we split it, it became a problem. Um, one of the ideas that we have, and yes, we do need to improve upon this, is that maybe Olivier and I do the actual releasing of all of our tools, and then as we need to do things such as update analyzers, file an issue and put it in the next iteration, or maybe it's in the current iteration or something along those lines. And that way it puts it back. One, it exposes work that was previously hidden. And two, it allows us to add it, to prioritize it against everything else that we're trying to do within that next iteration. And three, it moves the work back closer to those who are most familiar with those with those code bases, like for analyzer updates as an example. So we're going to be, yes, we need to change how we do release management. How we're going to do it, if we take someone out of the pool to do work, or if we're going to make it predominantly an EM task with issues that are spawned out of that for engineers to work. I'm not entirely sure. I will make sure to link that discussion into this retrospective issue, and I will throw it up on Slack so that we can so we can all communicate about it, and see what works for everybody. If that works, if everybody's on board with that. Okay. What else? Y'all are being quiet, so I'm thinking everybody's talking about how we release tools is where we can improve the most. Okay. Okay. Then that becomes what will be okay. Noted. Okay. Anything else anyone would like to add, since we have 5 minutes left in this conversation slot?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Maybe I'll ask the team in general for some feedback. So I guess one of the items I had listed there is like what didn't go so well. I'm kind of struggling to how to like prioritize the following. So I had so I worked on license management, right? I ended up creating a component that went into GitLab UI. So originally I was thinking like, all right, minimal viable change, right? The idea is that the least amount of effort to get this feature done. And I got pushed back from the maintainer saying, hey, we could, let's make this a generic component, get into GitLab UI. It's the right, what we should be doing. And as a result, I ended up with like 6 additional merge requests. I don't mind doing the work. That's not the issue. The issue was I felt like we could have easily just created a technical debt issue and scheduled that for a future release to say, hey, let's migrate this component over to GitLab UI. And as a result, we missed at least the initial issue by like 2 releases. Because all this additional work had to be done. Do you have any suggestions for like, in that case, should I just refer to the handbook and be like, look, I don't know. I guess like I feel like as a result of not pushing back on the maintainer suggestion, things were missed, at least 2 releases, and all this additional work was done when we easily could have landed it to begin with and then just followed up with the technical debt issue. We would have done the same amount of work. The difference would have been that we wouldn't have blocked the original, issue that was missed. Sorry if I'm talking abstract terms, but like I could provide examples and stuff. But
yeah. I see IP turned his camera back on, so I was going to let him answer first.
Yeah, by the way, this week I'm going to have it off all the time because it's going to be really hot here and I don't need to see you to see me all the time sweating. Anyway, yeah, I think that MR is like symptomatic, or these MRs is symptomatic, and it's also something that I'm a bit concerned about, not only about, working with maintainers in front end, but in general on issues. We really need to learn to scope down the work in chunks that can be merged every week. And this involves, participation by maintainers, by UX, by front end, by back end, by everyone. it's also symptomatic that we need better planning there, right? So that we can see, hey, we're going to tackle this issue in these steps, and instead of discovering all the stuff we need to do during them, we should do it in a better planning phase. And this is where I'm just urging everybody. Once you start seeing issues that are just too big, scope them down. And even if UX is not happy because, hey, in one release cycle, we might release something that's not UX perfect. Yes, because it's MVC. We need to scope things down. And maybe on the next time, I'm also now smarter when it comes to these issues. We should push back harder and say, hey, we should merge because we're going to iterate on it and not postpone. So every time you're seeing that, and this goes out to everybody, please, make us as a stage aware, or make your managers aware, or make your have like the eighth eye looking onto it. We should scope things down.
And
maybe, if you don't mind me asking a clarification question, and this is, I'm going to, since I've got Ross and Victor here as well, this is for you guys. Is this a bigger problem on front end than it is on back end, or do we see the same problems on back end as well?
I assume, sorry.
It's hard for me to tell that. It's hard for me to answer your question directly, but I have an example. I have an example of that long-hanging adding the security dashboard to the group as a group option of a group default dashboard. Initially, at the beginning of the cycle of this issue, it was significant scope expansion. It was an outcome of reviewers' suggestion, and actually it was a good candidate to say, hey, we agree that you are proposing a more consistent behavior, more well-designed behavior, but we should split it up. And maybe due to lack of experience, it was not done, it was not vocalized by me, but it was surely a good candidate. So I can say that it's not a symptomatic only for front end. It's like a generic issue, communicational problem that we should, I agree with IP that we should always resort to MVC and insist on splitting large issues into smaller chunks.
What's behind my question is that there's some candidate areas that I think we could anticipate some pushback on. In other words, an example being, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody or any part of the workload, is when we intentionally decide not to create a new reusable component within a component library in the UI, because we need to ship fast, and then we're going to follow up by genericizing the component itself. That's an example. So would it be possible for us to bypass anticipated maintainer feedback or pushback by making those choices explicit during earlier stages of an issue lifecycle when we're planning it, as an example, and going ahead and creating those related issues that we're going to, so that when we do need to make something a generic use case, we go ahead and do it. We create the issue first, implement fast, and then that way we can refer to this is deferred work, this is deferred work, this is deferred work, as opposed to, that way we're shorthanding at least the conversation a little bit quicker.
I mean, the problem is that the maintainer just might not care what your issue says, right? So, because if you do the implementation plan and the maintainer disagrees with your implementation plan, like, doing it the other way around, and if the maintainer is of the opinion, no, it should be a component first, then it should be a component first. How do you argue with that? Even if the plan is like, let's do it. Because we actually had the plan, we actually created the issue, hey, let's defer this discussion, pull it out into a new, maybe even it's a good starting issue for someone onboarding or something like this, right? So this is just, I think, when a lot of communication, and I don't want to single out the maintainer or something, it's just where a lot of communication needs to happen where we also can define that we need to define things better. And maybe it's also just our fault for not onboarding the maintainer into the discussion earlier to bring them into the thing, that this is how we are going to do it. What do you think? And if then escalating it, or I don't know. Yeah.
Fair enough. I was being curious.
I guess, sorry. I see a couple problems with that. One is like, you don't know what the maintainer is going to be, who the maintainer is going to be assigned to you when you open an issue for work. And I've lost track of what the second thing was. Oh, yes. No, like maybe you didn't have enough foresight to realize that would be a good candidate for a UI component when you started the issue. So you can't preemptively create a technical debt issue.
That's pretty, yeah, I don't want to go over the time, but that's pretty much exactly what happened. It started out as like, hey, this is, a specific feature for license management. And I was like, hey, it wouldn't take too much effort to maybe make this a reasonable component, but then it turned out to be a lot more effort. So then when the maintainer came by, he said, well, it should be a component. I agreed. And I linked them. It's like, well, are you okay? Here's a follow-up issue. We'll take care of that. And there was pushback on that. So really, the real question, this is probably outside the scope of this team, but like the real question might be, how do we escalate, or do we even have an option for maybe ping a different maintainer and see if they agree? And sometimes you may pull in another maintainer or two even, and they may disagree. So like where is the decision making done? Like does the maintainer have final say, or can, the priorities of a team ever override a maintainer? Like, I don't think that's kind of a gray area, because, we have priorities within our team. And normally if we didn't have a maintainer, then, PM could prioritize something and say, hey, this is an exception. But we have like another reporting structure for maintainers in terms of gatekeepers of the code. So I think those are just challenges we probably have to address in general. And maybe we would have to communicate with maintainers and try to bring that up as issues with them and see if they have any ideas for resolving those type of conflicts. And I've been talking to them. So I've been talking to a lot of maintainers back and forth, but it's not a clear-cut thing, because there are always edge cases. So
restating and expanding your scope, and I know we're over time. Thank you everybody for sticking around. What it sounds like you are articulating, as well as others are articulating within this call, is that how it is inconsistent in one, how we engage with maintainers themselves to get their attention when things are changing. And two, it is inconsistent on what is being enforced during maintainer review, and it is all based upon who you're interacting with. Is that a fair generalization of what is being stated?
Yeah, and as a follow-up, they are aware of that, and they have, I believe, like a weekly maintainer conversation, but our meeting, we could ask and follow up with you, but they are aware of it. So it's not like people don't know about it. It's a challenge to, everyone's aware of the problem. They're trying to figure out solutions. It's just very difficult. So.
Okay. Minimally, I would argue we should create, if it doesn't exist, then documentation on what maintainers are to be looking for or looking at, and how we engage with them should be created or extended or highlighted. So that if we're having issues engaging with someone or about the feedback that we are receiving, we can point back to handbook. Hey, this is something. I'm hearing a problem, and I'm trying to figure out a way to nip it in the bud. Okay. Let's talk more in the retrospective issue. I'll add some commentary and some questions, and we can go through it through there, unless anybody would like to continue this conversation. Okay. Alrighty, with that being said, we'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you everybody for participating. I appreciate I very much appreciate the conversation. This helps highlight what we've done, these are very important items that are brought up in the retrospective document, but it also kind of helps me distill where we think we did well as a stage, where we think we can improve, and what really was an issue. So that's going to help me articulate things up and be a better advocate for us as well, as a stage and also as a team. So thank you for your time. Thank you for participation. Have a good rest of your day, whether it is midday, beginning of your day, or it's time for you to go have dinner and sign off for the night. So anyway, thank you. Have a good rest of your time, and we'll talk soon.